Hello, everyone. I'm Billy.
And I'm Kamraun. Welcome to the Horse Frog Podcast, home of your two favorite professional digressors and the creators of the Malazan Brotherhood.
Today, I'm sorry, did that sound a tad too enthusiastic on that launch there, or was that just the right amount?
It's great to be enthusiastic.
I felt like it just sounds so good, you know. Today we'll be discussing Book 2, Chapter 9 of Memories of Ice, a novel in the Malazan Books of the Fallen. This is part 2 of our coverage of this chapter.
This podcast series is intended to be a companion to reading or listening to the books set in the Malazan universe. It's not a book review, and it is most definitely not a replacement to reading the books. Both Billy and I know this to be the best fantasy story ever written and want to share our love of the series with you.
We will be covering the events of the books in a linear fashion. There will be spoilers for those that have not read the books. We'll try not to spoil anything prior to us covering that portion of the respective book. And since we're just beginning, well, we're not just beginning. We've been going for a little bit, but we're working really hard to keep it spoiler free. And I must say, we've done a pretty outstanding job so far.
Agreed. A quick warning, today's episode contains descriptions of morbid, ghoulish, heinous, despicable, and vile depravity, and thus is not recommended for children.
Right. Do I need to do like a cackling in the background for that? Our show is listener supported. If you'd like to support us, we'd really appreciate that. You can do so by visiting our Patreon link on our website at horsefrogproductions.com. Currently, we're posting ad-free episodes on Patreon weekly.
Also, we'd really like to hear from you. And we mean that.
Right.
Send any feedback or comments to contact@horsefrogproductions.com. All right, Chapter 9, Part 2. We pick up the chapter where we left off, just as Talk, Lady Envy, and the Segula entered the Panyan Daman compound that held the temple within the hamlet. The compound's air was rife with the stench of decay, and as soon as Talk strode through the gate, he saw the source of the smell. A score of bodies lined the inside walls, large iron hooks jutting from beneath their breastbones, feet dangling an arm's length above the ground. Eyeless heads hung downward, strands of hair dripping with rainwater. The priest, seeing where the attention of his guests had focused, surveyed the corpses with a faint smile. He said, "The villagers have been delivered. Once the labors of building this temple were completed, they were given their reward. They remain before us as reminders of our Lord's mercy." Talk muttered, a rather peculiar version of mercy, as he struggled against a wave of nausea. The priest said, "One you will come to understand in time, sir. Please, a meal is being prepared. Seer Daman Kult, the master of this temple, awaits you within the guest hall." Lady Envy said, "How kind. An extraordinary construction, this temple of yours." Pulling his gaze from the murdered villagers, Talk studied the temple. The pyramidal shape continued down to ground level, the copper sheathing broken only by a dozen randomly placed skylights, each paned with slabs of thin rose quartzite. A narrow but high portal marked the entrance, framed by 4 massive cut stones, a broad threshold underfoot, 2 tapering, flanking menhirs, and a single lintel stone overhead. The corridor beyond was 3 strides in length, revealing the breadth of the pyramid's foundations.
I'm sorry.
I almost lost it when I heard you.
I'm so sorry. I won't do that because we'd be all night with that and the ochre. And once the ochre references really get in there, buddy, it's going to be hard. So I'll stop.
It's okay. I kept it together.
Shots fired. Shots fired. You did a great job, sir.
So this copper-sheathed pyramid for a temple, I had envisioned only the top of the tower being in the shape of the pyramid. But for this to be a full pyramid, the color of copper is pretty wild, especially since it was just built and there wouldn't be any verdigris on the copper.
Yeah, like I said, I had kind of envisioned that was a pyramid-shaped building to begin with. But the fact that it's this color, it is wild that it's not showing any age. But man, these guys don't play around when it gets. They get busy. They can't have finished this that long ago.
No, if those bodies are still hanging there and they're not bones, it had to be within the last couple weeks, right?
They just finished. It's like, okay, they're done. Okay, kill the guys. You guys helped us. Thanks so much.
They were rewarded, Billy.
They were rewarded. They achieved their pension. I don't want the pension plan from the Panyan Daman, please.
The special retirement dinner. No silver watch for these guys.
Nobody gets some sneakers and a purple jumpsuit.
The air within the temple was hotter than in the compound, the light tinted pink and fractiously cast by the windows. A low table awaited them, crowded with foodstuffs, and lined by pillows on which to recline. Standing before another triangular doorway, this one directly opposite the entrance, stood a huge figure in arcane black wrought armor. A double-bladed, long-handled axe leaned on the door's frame to his left. That triangular doorway helped me figure out what this architecture reminds me of. There was a movie named The Immortals, which was directed by Tarsem Singh, who also directed The Cell and The Fall. Have you seen either of those?
I've seen The Cell, and I've seen The Immortals.
Okay. Well, The Immortals is what we're talking about.
Okay.
At least you've seen the visual style that
yes,
he
I
films with.
love that, dude. And it figures that you and I are, we're probably the only people that love The Immortals. Cell seems to kind of have a cult following. I don't know what The Fall is about at all, but, dude, I love the visual look of Immortals. You know, for some reason, when I read mythology as a kid, I was kind of about, 5th, 6th grade or something like that when I kind of stumbled up on that stuff. Maybe like younger. I stumbled on it because of the old, you ever see the old Sinbad movies and all those Ray Harryhausen? Yeah, all that stuff. My dad loved that stuff too, so I was allowed to like mythology and stuff like that. So for some reason, there's always a lot of vague imagery in mythology. And the Immortals had a lot of vague imagery, and for some reason, that just fit perfectly with my mind. For some reason, I just loved that, dude.
That final scene of that movie where they had the huge battle in the heavens among the gods.
Yeah.
That was such an amazing visual scene right there.
Yeah.
Love it. The reason I mentioned that movie, the architecture that he uses is almost brutalist in nature.
Okay.
Would you agree with that description of it?
Yeah, if that is indeed what this is, yes, I would say that is just. I think that movie Immortals may possibly still be on Max. I need to rewatch it.
I was just watching it the other day. This pyramid with the triangular doorway, the way the knight was standing in front of it, evoked that imagery that you would have seen in that movie for me.
It does that for me. It's a combination. It also reaches some of that weird medieval stuff, and I've not read a lot of medieval fantasy, but my uncle bought me a book once with some fantasy stories, and it had some weird stuff in it. And that's where I was first kind of introduced to Lovecraft also, because it had one of his strange ones that was very obscure, but the imagery that to me it's always. If you see The Green Knight,
yes, I started watching that. That was a real hard movie for me.
I couldn't get into it, but the imagery was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But I got about 40 minutes into it. I'm like, do I care? It's like I don't care, but I love that the imagery is so great. But I can't watch a movie just because it looks great. You know, I've tried that before, but it looked good. But it's kind of the same idea in a way. They're tied together in a way. Did you feel that visually?
I think it's the way that he filmed it was similar.
Yeah, there's something about those fantastical elements, the way they're handled are very similar, and it's just very evocative. It strikes something very deep in me. I don't know how to lay my hands upon that, but it does.
That's interesting that you mentioned The Green Knight, because I think the scenes were not full of people, really. You didn't see any vast swaths of humanity. It was all just a couple characters here and there, and the realms that they were traveling through were not very populated. So I think I got a lot of that from The Green Knight as well.
You've seen we've mentioned this before. Excalibur. Excalibur has some of those elements as well.
Mm-hmm. Very
primitive. Is it primitive in a weird way? It's like not primitive like technology such they are to us, but I mean, I don't know. I'm way off rails. I don't know how to describe myself.
But yeah, I got the same feeling from those.
Cool.
Yeah, that architecture really reminded me of the architecture, particularly in King Hyperion's kingdom, which was played by Mickey Rourke in The Immortals. And then, of course, special mention, honorable mention, Henry Cavill was in it. It's pretty early in his career, but...
What's so funny?
Our savior.
Yeah, it's weird. It's just, Superman. When he... I'm sorry, folks. I'll have to say JC is my savior. But I love Henry Cavill, and I had made a note earlier, right as I said the movie here, and I said, oh, I saw that you made this comment. I had to cut it and paste it down here because I did make that note. Like, oh, that's too funny. You already knew that.
Henry Cavill will guide us in the Warhammer Cinematic Universe. So he's an executive producer on that. He will hopefully steer the ship straight.
I know nothing about Warhammer, and now I want to see it because of Henry Cavill. It's like, dude, I'm on.
Yeah, he's really into it.
It's just like, I'm on.
He views it very similar. The thing I appreciate the most about him is he wants to honor the work of the creator. And so this was a problem in The Witcher because he read the books, huge fan. He didn't want to make that many changes. And the showrunners were like, no, we got to change this. We got to change that. And, they're trying to insert a bunch of stuff, which was not there with the author's intention.
Subtext.
They wanted to modernize it with our social commentary from these days. And I'm hearing that Amazon's trying to do a lot of the same stuff, and Henry's like, no, can't do that because of this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
Hopefully they get that worked out and they put out a quality product.
Yes.
Moving along.
Okay, move along. I'll keep going. Move along.
The warrior by the doorway was bareheaded, his pate shaved, and his angular, beardless face revealed old scars along his jawline and down the length of his nose. Talk thought, hood's breath. I recognize those scars. A cheek-guarded, bridged helm makes those marks when someone swings a mace flush against it, that is. Frowning, Lady Envy hesitated, then turned to the priest. She said, I believe you said the high priest awaits us? The gaunt man smiled and said, And he does, mistress. He bowed towards the warrior and said, This is Seer Daman Kalt, the master of this temple. Seer Daman are the gifted among the Panyan Seer's children, warriors without parallel, yet learned as well. Now to complete the introductions, will you grant me the honor of your names? Lady Envy said, I am Lady Isla Drakon. My companion is named Tok the Younger. My bodyguards, Senu, Thurul, and the one presently sleeping is Mok. Do you wish the names of my pets as well?
Do you think that is really part of her name, Drakon? I'm just curious.
Has it been established that Draconis is her father yet?
I believe so.
In that case, clever truncation of the last name.
Right. Okay. I was just curious.
That did stick out to me.
Okay.
Talk thought, you just gave them, didn't you? The priest shook his head and said, That will not be necessary. No respect is accorded mindless animals within the Daman. Provided you have them within control, they will, for the sake of hospitality, be tolerated. Thank you for the introductions, lady. I shall now take my leave. With another bow, he turned and hobbled towards a small side door. Seer Daman Kalt took a step forward, armor clanking. He said, Seat yourselves. It is not often that we are privileged with guests. Lady Envy raised an eyebrow and asked, Not often? Kalt smiled and said, Well, you are the first, in fact. The Panyan Daman is an insular land. Few visit, and rarely more than once. There are some, of course, who receive the wisdom and so take the faith, and these are welcomed as brothers and sisters. Great are the rewards when the faith is embraced. His eyes glittered as he said, It is my fervent hope that such gifting will come to you. Tok and Lady Envy settled onto the cushions. Baeljag and Gareth remained with the Segula, who stood just within the entrance. Seer Daman Kalt sat down opposite his guests. He asked, One of your servants is ill? Shall I send for a healer, lady? Lady Envy said, Not necessary. Mok will recover in time. I am curious, Seer Daman. Why build a temple in such a paltry settlement, particularly if you then execute all the inhabitants? Kalt's face darkened. He said, The inhabitants were rewarded, not executed. We only execute criminals. Lady Envy asked, And the victims were satisfied with the distinction? Kalt said, Perhaps you might inquire that of them yourselves before too long, lady. Lady Envy said, Perhaps. Kalt said, To answer your question, this temple is one of 70 such recent constructions, each commanding a traditional border crossing to and from the Daman. The Panyan Seer's borders are ones of spirit as well as geography. It falls to his most faithful to accept the responsibility of regulation and protection. Lady Envy said, We are your guests then, so that you may gauge our measure and judge us worthy of entering your empire, or unworthy. Kalt shrugged and said, Please refresh yourselves. There is wine from Gredfellen. Most agreeable. The slices of flesh are bedouin. Lady Envy leaned forward and daintily picked up a slice, which she then tossed towards the chamber's entrance. Gareth stepped forward, sniffed the meat, then ate it. She smiled at Kalt and said, Thank you, we will. Kalt's hands twitched as he rasped, Among our people, what you have just done is a grave insult. Lady Envy said, Among mine, it's a matter of pragmatism. Kalt bared his teeth in a cold smile. He said, Trust and honor are valued traits in the Panyan Daman, lady. The contrast with the culture you are from can be made no more obvious. Lady Envy said, Indeed. Do you dare risk our corrupting influence? Kalt said, You have no influence, lady. Perhaps, however, we have. Tok poured himself some wine, wondering at what Envy was up to. They had walked into a hornet's nest, and, smiling, she was plucking one man's wings. I would be so nervous if I was Tok here. Lady Envy actively trying to upset their hosts while they know so little about them seems unwise.
It does. And do you think this is how Jimmy Olsen feels when he's hanging out with Superman? And they get caught up in all that nonsense, and a bunch of, planetary smashing fellows are running around in their tights, smacking things around. It's like, is he just going, good golly, am I going to get out of this alive because the debris is going to kill me? Is this what Tok's thinking?
Probably. Something along those lines.
That's kind of what I'm feeling like. It's like, wow.
Kalt had regained his composure. He said, "Is it wise to mask your servants, lady? The practice seems to run contrary to the needs of your unfortunate paranoia." Lady Envy said, "Ah, but they are more than simple servants, Seer Daman. They are, in fact, emissaries. Tell me, are you familiar with the Segula?" Kalt slowly leaned back, studying the Segula. He said, "The island people, who slay all our monks, and have asked us to declare war upon them, and mount an invasion fleet. Arrogance reaps its own reward, as they shall discover. After all, it is one thing to murder unarmed priests. 10,000 Seer Daman shall enact vengeance upon the Segula. Very well, do these emissaries now come to beg forgiveness?" Lady Envy said, "Oh no, they come to..." Talk's hand snapped out, closed on her arm. Surprised, she faced him. Talk murmured, "Lady," then turned to Colt and said, "They have been sent to deliver a message to the Panyan Seer, in person." In a dry tone, Lady Envy said, "That's certainly one way of putting it." Withdrawing his hand, Talk sat back, waiting for his heart to slow its wild hammering. Colt said, "There are provisos to such an audience. Disarmed, unmasked. Perhaps more, but that is not for me to decide." His gaze flicked back to Lady Envy. He asked, "How can these emissaries be your servants?" Lady Envy said, "A woman's wiles," flashing him a smile. He visibly flinched.
Dude, she is too much. I love it. Wow.
Do you think these priests have taken a vow of celibacy and it's paining him to see such a thing?
I'm sure, because everything she does, she just drips her sexuality out there for everything on the planet to see. I mean, that's her game. And so, it's part of her game, I'll put it like that. So if she's doing that to Talk, imagine what she's doing to these guys. She's probably cranking it up to 11 for them.
Yeah, I always pictured her as really classy. She's really beautiful, and she's manipulating them with her words and her touching their arms and all this other stuff. And these guys are really having a tough time resisting.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, like Talk said, had a hard time, walking around much further or something like that.
Talk thought, I know what that's like. Your heart's just turned to water, struggling not to prostrate yourself at her feet. I, plucked and now pinned and writhing. Colt cleared his throat, then said, "I shall now leave you to your repast. Sleeping chambers have been prepared. The monk who met you at the door will be your guide. Day's end is in a bell's time. Thank you for this most enlightening conversation." He rose, collected his axe from the wall behind him, then exited through the inner door. Talk grunted as the panel closed. He said, "Enlightening? Was that a joke?" Lady Envy said, "Eat up, my love, belly filled and content, before we receive our reward." Talk choked on a mouthful of wine, coughed helplessly for a time, then looked at her through a bleary eye. He rasped, "Reward?" Lady Envy said, "You and I, yes. I suspect the Segula will be given a proper escort or some such thing. Baeljag and Gareth will be butchered, of course. Here, try this. It's delicious. Before dawn is my guess. The fire in our veins released to greet the sun's rise, or some such thing equally pathetic. Then again, we could embrace the faith. Do you think we'll convince him? What kind of fruit is this? Tastes like a soldier's foot wrap. I don't... He's made up his mind, you see." Man, she's all over the place. How do you even follow the conversation?
I'm sorry. I'm still laughing. It tastes like a foot wrap. In Breaking Bad, his son in the first episode always says that turkey bacon tastes like Band-Aids. It's like...
Talk said, "And you helped him along, lady." She asked, "Did I?" She paused, looked thoughtful for a moment, then reached for some bread and said, "I can't imagine how. True, I was irritated. Have you ever noticed how language can be twisted to mask brutality? Ah, a thought. Look at the Segula. Masked, yes, yet they speak true and plain, do they not? Is there something in that, do you think? Some hidden significance? Our malleable, fleshy visages are skilled at deceit, a far more subtle mask than what the brothers over there are wearing. More wine? Quite wonderful. Gredfallen? Never heard of it. The Segula reveal only their eyes, devoid of framing expression, yet portals to the soul nonetheless. Remarkable. I wonder who originated the custom, and why." Talk interrupted, "Lady, please, if they intend to kill us." Lady Envy said, "Intentions are unimportant, my dear. I taste clover in this honey. Lovely. By the way, the walls around us are mostly hollow, but not unoccupied. Would you be so kind as to deliver these plates of meat to my pups? Thank you, darling, you're sweet." Talk growled, "All right, so now they know that we know. What now?" Lady Envy said, "Well, I don't know about you, but I am dead tired. I do hope the beds are soft. Are the Panyans interested in such conveniences as plumbing, do you think?" Talk said, "Nobody's interested in plumbing, Lady Envy, but I'm sure they've worked something out." Dude, when I read that, I was laughing. Because I wonder if it's true that no one is interested in plumbing. The reason I thought this was the last time I went to get my teeth cleaned at the dentist, the hygienist was totally geeking out over the shape of one of my teeth. And I was thinking, this lady is so into teeth. And I asked her, when did you know that you wanted to be a hygienist? And she said, ever since she was about 6 years old.
Wow.
She knew she'd go to the dentist. She loved all the tools and she enjoyed getting her teeth cleaned and all this other stuff.
Huh.
When Talk says nobody's interested in plumbing, I was wondering, has anybody ever, as a child, just been drawn to plumbing? And that's their thing. And they knew they wanted to be a plumber. From then on, they work towards that, and then they're happy doing it, and they're all about it. You think that somebody like that exists in this world?
I'm sure that someone out there loves it enough. I don't know if it's going to love it enough to realize that no one wants to do it and can charge a lot of money and get it done, and then make your own company once you make enough money, and then pay other fellows to do it. So you no longer have to do it, but you can charge a lot of money. I don't know, but I would think maybe somebody that discovered things like slab leaks or something like this discovered, a love of plumbing. There's got to be a love of it somewhere. I understand that there is necessity, but sometimes a lot of stuff that is arisen out of necessity is arisen out of necessity because someone has loved something enough to do something about it. And therefore there is a type of love involved, maybe. I don't know.
There's got to be at least one person in this world.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't that be neat to find your calling that early in life and be totally happy with it?
Yeah. It would be amazing. I knew what I wanted to be, but discovered it's not what I was supposed to be. I thought I was going to be a rock star, but
You are a rock star, Billy.
Well, I mean, metaphorically, I speak. I appreciate that, but I appreciate it. I appreciate it literally, but I appreciate that you think metaphorically I'm a rock star. But yes, thank you. I appreciate that, sir.
Lady Envy said, "Repast complete. Now where is our poor little monk?" A side door opened and the man appeared. Lady Envy quipped, "Extraordinary coincidence. Thank your master for the repast, cowed one, and please lead the way."
Wow.
Can you imagine calling someone cowed one?
It's just like, tell us how you really feel, Lady Envy. I know she's doing this deliberately. I'm sure she's trying to do this to bring this situation. It's better to bring it to a head than sit around waiting for it.
The most appropriate usage of this would be if you saw a married couple and the husband was completely beaten down by the wife. But it would be mean to call him cowed one because...
What would you prefer to call him?
Because you just be beating him while he's down,
Oh my word, dude! There's an Alfred Hitchcock. One of his next to last movies, Frenzy, is kind of like it's a serial killer movie, actually. Very intriguing one of his, and by the way, it's got a real dark sense of humor. This woman runs a dating agency, and we meet this couple coming out of the dating agency, and they seem to be okay, because this is a pretty tall woman and a smaller fella, and yet he has that same nature where as she's talking to him, like they've just met, and as they're walking down the next, she's like, "Well, now let me tell you about my late husband." And like he did this, he woke up at this morning, did the breakfast, had my breakfast ready, did blah blah. He says, so he was a neat man, was he, or something was the man's response. But it's like, oh my word, this poor fella. Yeah, that's a cowed one for sure. Impact.
The monk bowed, then gestured. He said, "Follow me, honored guests. Alas, the beasts must remain outside, in the compound." Lady Envy said, "Of course." The man bowed again. Lady Envy fluttered the fingers of one thin hand, and Baljag and Gareth loped outside. The monk murmured, "Well trained, lady." She said, "You have no idea." The sleeping chambers ran the length of one wall, small, square, low-ceilinged rooms, unfurnished except for narrow, hide-mattressed cots and a lantern sitting on a shelf on one wall. A room at the far end of the hallway was provided for communal bathing. Its floors tiled and sunken at gradating levels in the various pools, the water continually flowing and cool and clean. Leaving the lady to her ablutions, Talk entered his sleeping chamber and set his pack down with a sigh. His nerves were already in tatters, and listening to Envy's melodic singing wasn't helping. He threw himself on the cot, then thought, "Sleep? Impossible. These bastards are whetting their knives right now, preparing our reward. We're about to embrace the faith, and its face is a death's head." His eyes snapped open at a sudden curdling scream. It was dark. The lanterns had either gone out or been removed. Talk realized he'd fallen asleep after all, and that had the stench of sorcery. The scream sounded again, ending in a dwindling gurgle. Claws clicked down the hallway outside his room. Covered in sweat yet shivering, Talk edged off the bed. He drew the obsidian dagger Tool had made for him, settled the grip in his right hand, then unsheathed his own iron knife with his left. He thought, claws. Either there's soul taken here or Baljag and Gareth are paying a visit. He silently prayed it was the latter. A crash of masonry made him jump, a wall tumbling into ruin somewhere close. Someone whimpered, then squealed as bones snapped. The sound of a body being dragged just outside his door had Talk crouching low, knives trembling. He thought, dark. What in Hood's name am I supposed to do? I can't see a damn thing. The door splintered in its frame under the impact of some large body. As the report echoed, the door fell inward, beneath the weight of a naked corpse faintly illuminated by low light coming from the hallway. A massive head slid into view, eyes dully glowing. Talk loosed a shuddering sigh. He whispered, Baeljag, you've grown since I last saw you. The A, after the briefest pause of mutual recognition, lumbered past the doorway. Talk watched the full length of the beast's body slide by, then he followed. The hallway was a shambles. Shattered stone, mangled cots, and pieces of flesh everywhere. The walls were painted in splashes of blood and bile. He thought, gods, has this wolf been crashing through arm-length thick stone walls? How? Head slung low, claws clacking, Baeljag padded towards the bathing chamber. Talk moved slightly in the A's wake. Before they arrived, a second four-legged shape emerged from a side passage beside the entrance. Dark, mottled gray and black, and dwarfing Baeljag. Coal-lit eyes set in a broad, blood-soaked head slowly fixed on Talk. He thought, Gareth? The creature's shoulders were covered in white dust. It edged to one side to allow Baeljag to pass. Talk followed. He murmured, Gareth, what was in those veteran slices you ate anyway? The gentle pet was gone this night, and in his place Gareth had become a slayer of the highest, coldest order. Gareth allowed Talk to pass, then swung round and slunk off back the way it had come. A row of candles on the far wall lit the bathing chamber. Baeljag, nose to the tiles, was skirting the pools. The trickling water was crimson and steaming. Through its murk, Talk could see 4 corpses, all armored, lying at the bottom of the pools. He could not be sure, but he thought that they had been boiled alive. This is something straight out of a horror movie.
Oh, very much. What's bad, I meant to say this earlier, this town has the vibes. You remember in Apocalypse Now when they get to Brando's camp?
It's been so long since I've seen that movie, I don't remember that specific scene.
Okay. They get to a place, actually it has a pyramid there, as a matter of fact. Pyramid-shaped temple of Ziggurat. And there's piles of heads laying all around because he's been having these people, when everybody they kill, they just decapitate them and throw this mountain of, it's just some really dark imagery there. And it's, for some reason, that's the vibes I get in this town. And especially seeing what she's done here, it's like, good gracious, her response is straight out just as horrible.
Yeah. The way he describes this entire scene, it really does a good job of adding the tension and painting such a scary image.
The only thing missing is if this was an alien movie, there'd be a lot of strobe lights going on. But it's the same, you get the same vibe. So, it's the same vibe from an alien movie. It's just not modern-ish,
I'm not a big fan of the strobe lights. I do like the high contrast shadow with the dark recesses, and you have maybe some mist or smoke so that it really makes it obscured, but I prefer that to the flashing.
I don't like the flashing. It gets on my nerves sometimes, but that's kind of what I'm reminded of. It's a scene like that minus the strobe lights. Maybe an occasional lightning flash would make it really nice.
Right. Talk pitched against a wall, and in a series of racking heaves, lost the supper the seer Daman had so kindly provided. Distant crashing shook the floor beneath his feet. He thought, Gareth continuing his relentless hunt. Oh, you poor bastards. You invited the wrong guests into your temple. He heard Lady Envy say, oh, there you are. Still sickened, he twisted round to see her, dressed in her spotless white nightclothes, her raven hair tied up and pinned, standing at the doorway. Eyes on the corpses in the pools, she regretfully said, that armor proved fatally heavy, alas. Oh well, come along, you two. Senu and Thurul should be finished with the Seer Daman warriors. Bewildered, Talk asked, there's more than one? Lady Envy said, there were about 20 in all. Cult was their captain as well as being the temple's high priest. Warrior priests. What an unfortunate combination. Back to your room now, my dear. You must gather up your belongings. We're rendezvousing in the compound. She set off. Stumbling in her wake, with Baeljag trailing, Talk drew a deep, shuddering breath. He asked, has Tool shown up for this? Lady Envy said, I've not seen him. He wasn't required in any case. We had matters in hand. Talk exclaimed, with me snoring like a fool! Lady Envy said, Baeljag watched out on your behalf, my love. You were weary, were you not? Ah, here we are. Gather your accoutrements. Gareth intends to destroy this temple. Talk snapped, yes, about Gareth. Lady Envy said, you don't wake up well at all, do you, young man? Surely we can discuss all this later? Talk growled, fine, we will indeed. To Talk's credit, I'm also fairly short-tempered and disoriented when I'm abruptly woken up from a nap where I'm sleeping deeply like he was.
Yes. Agreed. If I'm at the heavy Z's, dude, yeah, it's a bad one when you startle me. I may not be hateful, but I won't necessarily. It's like you got to give me a couple minutes to become to be awakened, to be somewhat pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what a shade shy of pleasant is. Bearable.
The inner chambers of the temple thundering into dust, Talk stood in the compound, watching the two Segula dismounting the corpses of the villagers and replacing them with the freshly butchered bodies of the Seer Daman warriors. Colt, bearing a single thrust wound through the heart, was among them. And what an image that is. Do you think the Segula are as disgusted with the Panions as Lady Envy is, or is she commanding them to act?
I believe, especially if this is the putative force of the Segula sent here, they're actually on job at this point. And I think a highly regimented, because I believe them as they are obviously a highly regimented society, I think they'd be offended by these people.
Yeah, I mean, they're already pissed at them anyway. And then seeing what they're doing to their fellow countrymen, I'm sure it doesn't make matters better.
Yeah.
At Talk's side, Lady Envy murmured, "He fought with fierce determination. His axe was everywhere, yet it seemed that Thurul barely moved. Unseen parries. Then he languidly reached out and stabbed the Seer Daman captain straight through the heart. A wondrous display, Talk the Younger." Talk muttered, "No doubt. So tell me, does the Seer know about us now?" Lady Envy said, "Oh yes, and the destruction of this temple will pain him greatly." Talk said, "He'll send a hood-damned army down on us." Lady Envy said, "Assuming he can spare one from his northern endeavors, that seems likely. Certainly he will feel the need to respond in some manner, if only to slow our progress." Talk said, "I might as well turn back here and now." She raised an eyebrow and asked, "You lack confidence?" Talk said, "Lady, I'm no Segula. I'm not an A on the edge of ascendancy. I'm not a Talani Mass. I'm not a dog that can stare eye to level eye with a hound of shadow. I'm not a witch who can boil men alive with a snap of her fingers." Lady Envy shouted, "A witch! Now I'm offended." She advanced on him, arms crossed, eyes flaring. She said, "A witch! And have you ever seen me snap my fingers? By the abyss, what an inelegant notion." He took an involuntary step back and said, "A figure of speech." She said, "Oh, be quiet." She took his face in her hands, pulled him inexorably closer. Her full lips parted slightly. Talk tried to pull away, but his muscles seemed to be dissolving around his bones. She stopped suddenly and frowned. She said, "No, perhaps not. I prefer you free." The frown shifted to a scowl, and she said, "Most of the time, in any case, though you have tried my patience this morning." She released him, studied his face for a moment longer, then smiled and turned away. She said, "I need to get changed, I think. Senu, when you're done, find me my wardrobe." Talk slowly shook himself. He was trembling, chilled in the wake of a sure, instinctive knowledge of what that kiss would have done. He thought, and poets write of the chains of love. Ha! What they write figuratively, she embodies literally. If desire could have a goddess. This reminds me of the honored maters in Dune who would enslave men. Do you pick that up as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
I wonder if that was an influence for her.
I'm assuming so. I know for Gardens in particular, I think he was highly influenced by Dune.
A swirl of dust, and Tool rose from the ground beside him. Tool turned his head, stared over at Mock's recumbent form near the outer gate, then said, "Kael hunters are converging on us." It seemed Tool was about to say something more, then simply vanished once again. Lady Envy called out to Talk, "See? Now aren't you glad that I insisted you get some sleep?"
It's very military of her.
Mm-hmm. They came to a crossroads marked by two menhirs, leaning and half buried on a low rise between the two cobbled roads. Arcane hieroglyphs had been carved into their faces, the pictographs weathered and faint. Menhirs abound in the Panyan Daman, it would seem.
Oh, a truly menhired land, sir.
Oh, that's good, dude. The menhired one approaches the menhired land.
Yes. What's he going to do to the menhirs?
He will join them. Lady Envy stood before the menhirs. Chin...
Oh, my word. Oh, is this triggerous now? Is this now a trigger for us?
Yes.
Oh, no. Okay.
Chin propped on one hand as she studied the glyphs. She said, "How curious. The root of this language is Amari, Genostilian, I suspect." Talk asked, "What do they say? Let me guess. All who come here shall be torn in two, flayed alive, beheaded, and badly beaten. She glanced back at him, a brow raised, and said, The one to the right indicates the road to Kel-Tor. The one to the left, Bastion. None the less remarkable for all the mundanity of the messages. Clearly the Panyan Daman was once a Genostel colony. The Genostellians were distant seafarers, my dear. Alas, their glory waned centuries ago. A measure of their height is evinced by what we see before us, for the Genostel archipelago is halfway across the world from here. Genostel is a new region we haven't encountered before. It is an island far to the west of 7 cities. Grunting, Tok squinted up the heaved road that led to Bastion. He said, Well, maybe their city survived, but by all accounts the Panyans were once hill peoples. Herders, barbaric, rivals of the Daru and Gadrobi tribes. Your colony was conquered, Lady Envy. Lady Envy said, It's always the way, isn't it? A civilization flowers, then a horde of grunting savages with close-set eyes show up and step on it. Malazan Empire, take note. Tok muttered, Never ignore the barbarians. Emperor Kellanved's words. Wise man.
Yeah.
Civilization players will likely agree with that sentiment.
It's interesting that you mentioned Civilization. I just bought a $2 version of Civilization 5 because I think 6 is coming out or just came out or whatever.
No, 6 has been out. 7's about to come out.
Oh, maybe it was 6 I bought.
But I still play 5.
Oh, maybe it's 5. But I bought it for the PS5, strangely enough, because I'll get around to that with you after the show.
Okay. You got to watch out for those barbarians, though. They're so annoying.
Barbarians, man. I'm so sorry. I almost think I got to watch out for the Mongolians. But yeah. No offense to the Mongolians. The Mongolians
you can play the Mongolians
paper and respect. Rock and roll, dude.
Genghis Khan is very hostile.
He probably fits my style of play, but mine is, I play a really thoroughly, I'm sorry, my Civilization reference is going to go back to Civilization 1. What is it? 30 years old. So I have no idea how old that is. I would play it as the Romans, always the Romans. And once I would take over a city, it was like you swept in after you took it over and really built it up real quick with a huge settler influx, and then you moved on. But once I got the nukes, it was like you just sat around everything and just waited with settlers outside waiting to nuke everything and then clean up the pollution.
Oh, wow. I either play Korea for their research for science or the Egyptians so I can build wonders.
Okay. Oh, nice. Okay. As Koreans for science is a win for me. I like that idea. I'll try that out.
I do scientific win quite frequently. I like to have that technology so my military units are more advanced and able to defend.
Right. Yeah.
Sargon gave me a lot of problems the last game that I played.
Okay.
So, yeah, watch out for Genghis Khan for sure and Sargon, those two. And then Dido from Carthage.
Okay.
They just constantly harass you.
Every time I hear Carthage, I always think of Patton. Sorry. Those Patton flashbacks.
Lady Envy said, Surprisingly wise. What happened to him? Tok said, He was murdered by a woman with close-set eyes, but she was from civilized stock. Napin, if you can call Napins civilized. From the heart of the empire, in any case. I had put here, I was going to ask you about the close-set eyes, but I think when I was reading this, I noticed Lady Envy had said that grunting savages with close-set eyes show up and step on a civilization that is flowering. So he's just quoting back to her.
Okay, close-set eyes.
I was thinking, is she a predator?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, in many ways, yes.
I would say yes. That's not an unflattering portrait of her in a way.
It's funny, there are some actresses that every movie that they're in, I'm like, ugh, I can't stand looking at them. And we quantified what I don't like about them is their eyes are too wide set. And my wife was commenting that apparently I like predatory women with close set eyes that don't look so herbivore-like, if you will.
Well, I get it. So doe-like.
Yes.
I get you. I'm the same. And but the close set eyes, what's funny when I was looking on Google, the ever-present Google, the oracle of Google, for beauty standards, close set eyes is usually one that's more desired from men and women. But what's funny, it was like one, but it also seemed to indicate a trustworthiness. But if the other, in this context, especially, and what was just mentioned, it's definitely meant to be an insult and non-trustworthiness. Barbarians. Barbarians.
Lady Envy said, Baaljag looks restless, my dear. We should resume our journey. What with all these undead, two-legged lizards on their way? Tok said, Tool said the nearest ones were still days distant. How far is it to Bastion? Lady Envy said, we should arrive by dusk tomorrow night, assuming the distance indicated on these milestones remains accurate. They set off down the road. Tok saw no one as the day wound on. Old carcasses of cattle and sheep in the pastures to either side showed evidence of predation by wolves. As they paused for a mid-afternoon rest on the outskirts of yet another abandoned hamlet, this one without a temple, Tok checked his weapons one more time, then hissed in frustration and glared at Lady Envy, who was sitting across from him. He said, this doesn't make sense. The Damon's expanding, voraciously. Armies need food, so do cities. If the countryside's home to nothing but ghosts, who in Hood's name is supplying them? Lady Envy shrugged and said, I'm not the one to ask, my love. Questions of materiel and economics leave me deathly bored. Perhaps the answers to your irrelevant concerns will be found in Bastion. Tok asked, irrelevant? Lady Envy said, well, yes, the Daman is expanding. It has armies and cities. These are facts. Details are for academics, Tok the Younger. Shouldn't you be concerning yourself with more salient matters, such as your survival? He stared at her, then slowly blinked. He said, Lady Envy, I am already as good as dead, so why think about it? Lady Envy said, absurd. I value you too highly to see you simply cut down. You must learn to trust me, darling. He looked away and said, details, lady, reveal hidden truths. Know your enemy. That's a basic tenet. What you know you can use. He hesitated, then continued. Details can lead one to trust as well, when it comes to the motives and interests of those who would be allies.
I just have a thought that just struck me really randomly. She really seems to be into Tok. And do you think part of that is because, man, he must have been, before his face was smashed, he must have been really good looking, because he must still be really good looking. He thinks he's not, but she's really into him. For some reason, I find her genuinely kind of into him. Do you?
I think it's not because of his looks. I mean, she's been around for hundreds of thousands of years. Mm-hmm. And I suspect that at some point you realize that looks aren't everything, and the substance of an individual becomes more important. Hopefully that's what's going on here. Okay. Is there's something about Tok and his personality that intrigues her.
Yeah, because I sincerely find her to be, I don't know if it's intrigued or drawn to him or likes him, or it's just all the above, part of the intrigued. All under that heading from her to him. I know it just punishes him. She's trying to keep him free because she likes him enough that way. Be like, I want you to be free,
Maybe it's the fact that he's resisting.
Could be. I guess that could be
That's part of it, too. The unobtainable.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, right on.
Lady Envy said, I see. And what is it you wish to know? He met her eyes and asked, what are you doing here? Lady Envy said, why, Tok the Younger, have you forgotten? Your Talanai masked companion has said that the secrets of the Morn Rent can only be found within the Daman. Tok growled, a convenience, lady. You're busy manipulating. All of us. Me, the Segula, even Tool himself. He gestured and said, Gareth, your pup. He could be a hound of shadow. Lady Envy smiled and said, he could be indeed. I believe, however, that he is reluctant. Tok asked, what does that mean? Lady Envy said, you are very easily exasperated, my dear. If you're a leaf trembling on a wide, deep river, relax and ride the current. It's always worked for me, I assure you. As for manipulation, do you truly believe I have the power to pull and prod a Talanai mass? The Segula are, unique. We travel in step, after all. Thus the notion of coercion does not arise. Tok said, not yet, maybe, but it will, lady. She shrugged, then said, finally, I have no control over Gareth, or Baeljag. Of that I assure you. Tok bared his teeth and said, leaving just me. She reached out, rested a slim hand lightly on his arm. She said, in that, darling, I am simply a woman. He shook her hand off and said, there's sorcery in your charms, Lady Envy. Don't try and tell me otherwise. Lady Envy said, sorcery? Well, yes, you could call it that, I suppose. Mystery as well, yes? Wonder and excitement. Hope and possibilities. Desire, darling, is a most alluring magic. And, my love, it is one to which I am not immune. She leaned closer, her eyes half closed. She said, I will not force my kiss upon you, Tok the Younger. Don't you see? The choice must be yours, else you shall indeed be enslaved. What do you say? Tok said, time to get going. He rose then said, obviously, I won't be hearing any honest answers from you. She said, I have just given them, as she stood up. Tok said, enough! I've stopped playing, Lady Envy. Take the game elsewhere. She said, oh, how I dislike you when you're like this. He muttered, sulk away, and set off down the road. She shouted, I shall lose my temper, young man. Do you hear me? He stopped and glanced back, then said, we've got a few leagues worth of daylight left. She shouted, oh, and stamped her foot, then said, you're just like Rake. Tok's lone eye slowly widened, then he grinned. He said, take a few deep breaths, lass. She shouted, he always said that too. Oh, this is infuriating. It's all happening again. What is wrong with all of you? I'd love to
Wow.
see Rake getting the best of her when she was trying to manipulate him.
That would be wonderful to see. What's funny, I guess I just kind of answered my question here about what she sees in him. She sees something of Rake in him in a strange way. And back to what we were just talking about, was it Baljag or Gareth?
No, Gareth.
Gareth, sorry. With Gareth, he's like waiting. Is there like a trial process that there's some other entities out there that are maybe on the verge of this? And first, again, we always do the rat race thing, but it's like whoever gets there first becomes it. And so Gareth is, like, I guess I could become one if I wanted. I'm just going to hang it back with you, though.
Well, I don't know if there's any openings. Well, I guess 2 of the Hounds of Shadow have been killed, right?
Yes.
So I guess there are openings. Maybe those spots can be filled. In terms of a trial process, who knows how something becomes a Hound of Shadow?
Yeah, I just love it. These have like 0 issues, and for a comic book, it's a 0 issue story. The prequel. It's what happens before. Before he was the Hound of Shadow, he was chilling with them doing this. It's kind of funny that way, but I like it. I don't know. I just find that interesting thought.
Yeah. Talk laughed, not harshly, but with genuine warmth. He said, "Come along, Envy. I'll bore you with a detailed recounting of my youth. It'll pass the time. I was born on a ship, and it was more than a few days before Talk the Elder stepped forward to acknowledge his fatherhood. My mother was Captain Cartheron Crust's sister, you see, and Crust had a temper." What?
Whoa.
Cartheron Crust is his uncle? What a small world this is.
Wow. I was just blown away by this reveal. I mean, no wonder Talk is so awesome. His bloodline so far seem to be impeccable. Could he be the one? Could he be the Quisat Haderach? Sorry.
So, quick reminder, Cartheron Crust was supposedly dead. Turns out he was captain of the Rag Stopper.
Yeah.
We found out at the end of the book that was the captain. And quite a legendary captain at that.
Yeah. He survived that sorcerer's attack.
Yes.
I mean, that's something else. I mean, he knew something was wrong and was fighting it off to some extent, I think.
Yeah. He was trapped in his mind, but he was trying to fight it as best he could. The lands lying just beyond Bastion's walls were devastated. Within sight of the small city's squat walls, the remnants of massive bonfires dotted the landscape like round barrows dusted with white ash. No one walked the wasteland. Smoke hung over Bastion's buildings. The stench of fire masked the smell of the lake on the other side of the city. The gates were ajar. As they neared, Talk caught a glimpse of movement beyond the archway, as of a figure swiftly passing, dark and silent. His nerves danced. He wondered aloud, what has happened here? Lady Envy said, very unpleasant. They strode beneath the shadow of the arch, and the air was suddenly sickly sweet with the smell of burning flesh. Talk hissed through his teeth. Baljag and Gareth both returned to modest proportions, trotted forward, heads slung low. Lady Envy said, I believe the question of sustenance has a grim answer indeed. Talk nodded and said, they're eating their own dead. I don't think it's a good idea to enter this city. She turned to him and asked, are you not curious? Talk said, curious, aye, but not suicidal. Lady Envy said, fear not. Let us take a closer look. Talk said, envy! Her eyes hardened. She said, if the inhabitants are foolish enough to threaten us, they shall know my wrath. And Gareth says, well, if you think this is ruination now, your judgment will receive a lesson in perspective, my dear. Come. Talk said, yes, ma'am. Lady Envy said, familiarity breeds facetiousness, I see. How regrettable. The two Segula and their unconscious master trailing 3 paces behind them, Talk and Lady Envy strode into the square. Split human long bones were piled against the inner walls, some calcined by heat, others red and raw. The buildings facing onto the square were blackened, doorways and windows gaping. The bones of various animals, dogs, mules, horses, and oxen, lay about, gnawed and split. We've heard about the Teniscari horde feeding, but to see the results of it described add to the horror.
Yeah, it's, again, kind of goes back to what I mentioned about the Apocalypse. It's like a slash. Apocalypse Now meets the Italian version, the original version of a Cannibal Holocaust. Very troubling cannibal flick. So, yeah, it's there. It's kind of, I've got that vibe here. It's like it does play the cue, the really disturbing music, the really gritty 8mm film for this section here as we crawl through this.
3 men who were obviously priests awaited them in the center of the square. Clean-shaven, gaunt, and pale in their colorless robes. One took a step forward as Talk and Envy approached. He said, strangers, welcome. An acolyte saw you on the road, and we 3 have hastened to greet you. You have chosen an auspicious day to visit glorious Bastion. Alas, this day also places your lives in great peril. We shall endeavor to guide you, and thus improve the likelihood of your surviving the embrazure's violent afterbirth. if you will follow us. He gestured toward a side street and said, At the mouth of Iltara Avenue, we shall have removed ourselves from the Exodus's path, yet remain available to witness the miracle. Lady Envy said, Ideal. We thank you, holy ones. The walk to the mouth of the side street was no more than 50 paces, yet in that time the city's silence was replaced by a growing murmur, a dry susurration approaching from Bastion's heart. Upon arriving, Baeljag and Gareth returned to flank Lady Envy. Senu and Thirul set the travois down against the wall of a corner building, then faced the square once more, hands on their weapons. The priest said, The will of the faith has embraced the citizens of Bastion. It arrives like a fever that only death can abate. Yet it must be remembered that the embrasure was first felt here in Bastion itself, 14 years ago. The seer had returned from the mountain, speaking the words of truth, and the power of those words rippled outward. The priest's voice broke with some kind of emotion wrought by his own words. He bowed his head, his entire body trembling. Another priest continued for him. The faith flowered here first. A caravan from Ellengarth was encamped beyond the walls. The foreigners were rewarded in a single night, and the first child of the dead seed was gifted to the mortal world 9 months later. That child has now come of age, an event that has triggered a renewed burgeoning of the faith. A second embrasure has occurred, under the command of the first child, Anaster. You shall see him now, his mother at his side, leading the newfound Teniscauri. A war awaits them far to the north. The faithless city of Capistan must be rewarded. Lady Envy said, Holy ones, please forgive my ignorance. A child of the dead seed. What precisely is that? The priest said, The moment of reward among the male unbelievers, mistress, is often marked by an involuntary spilling of life seed, and continues after life has fled. At this moment, with a corpse beneath her, a woman may ride and so take within her a dead man's seed. The children that are thus born are the holiest of the seer's kin. Anaster is the first to reach his age. Unholy abomination. This is one of those unfortunate core memories that has been imparted on me by this series. It's truly horrible.
Oh, yeah. This is really bad, okay? And not only that, it's like that alone, just that little bit of a sentence, that's a horror movie in and of itself. It's like The Hills Have Eyes and some other ones rolled together. And it's like, okay, this is how we get that.
Yeah. The only way this could be worse is if there's some type of incest involved. And then you have like the unholy trifecta of cannibalism,
yes, right.
Fornicating with the dead, and then like incest. It's terrible, dude. It's like
incestuous fornication with the dead, yes.
The worst
that they're eating.
The worst stuff imaginable.
Yeah, all rolled into one. Yeah, it's like Rob Zombie. This is like Rob
exactly.
Zombie.
That's what it feels like a little bit.
Yeah, it's that real fever dream kind of vision of that this stirs up in my brain. I don't like what it stirs up, but it's what this is a really core. Yeah, very core.
Yeah. Lady Envy said, That is extraordinary. Talk saw her face sickly pale for the first time in his memory. The priest said, The seer's gift, mistress, a child of the dead seed bears the visible truth of death's kiss of life, proof of the reward itself. We know that foreigners fear death, the faithful do not. Talk cleared his throat and leaned close to the priest. He said, Once these Teniscauri leave Bastion, is there anyone else still breathing in the city? The priest said, Embrasure is absolute, sir. Talk said, In other words, those who did not succumb to the fever have been rewarded. The priest said, Indeed. Talk added, And then eaten. The priest said, The Teniscauri have needs. Conversation ended then as the leading edge of a mass of humanity poured from the main avenue and began spreading to fill the square. A young man was in the lead, the only person mounted, his horse an aged roan draft animal with a bowed spine and botfly sores on its neck. As the youth rode forward, his head whipped suddenly to where Talk and the others stood. He stabbed a long, thin arm in their direction and shrieked. The cry was wordless, yet it was understood by his followers. Hundreds of faces swung to look upon the strangers, then surged towards them. That image gives me chills. This could be a truly good scene visually from a horror perspective.
Oh, yeah.
The shriek.
There's a couple that already exist, strangely enough. It's strange. I just saw this recently, right after Donald Sutherland passed away. R.I.P. Donald Sutherland. I watched that 70s version of The Invasion of the Body Snatchers. There's like 4 treatments of that movie, and I love all of them because I just love even the bad ones are still good. But that one is a fantastic one, and there's a really great reveal at the end where he does that same thing. He points and gives this mouthless wail to indicate, basically like a siren, like I got one over here that's not one of us. Even though this guy is like leading that group, it's kind of that same type thing, though. He's pointing that way and give me that same, and I get that same chill from that thing. Yeah.
I'm having another idea of it happening with some lady, like a vampire or something. I can't remember what it was.
Mm-hmm.
What movie it was. It'll come to me later, probably.
South Park has done this. There's been there's a lot of this imagery that exists that can be rolled together, that's to be drawn from for sure. That's why it's so easy. He's such a visual writer, man. All these things come to my mind so easily that he brings to us.
Yeah. The idea of what this kid looks like, too. Sickly, sallow, just horrible.
Stringy, nasty hair.
Mm-hmm. Filthy.
Yes.
Grubby. All the bad things.
Yes.
Probably got sores all over him. Ugh.
Yeah.
Lady Envy said, "Oh." The second priest flinched back and said, "Alas, our protection is insufficient. Prepare for your reward, strangers." And with that, the free acolytes fled. The way they said prepare for your reward, it sounds like some amazing corporate speak there. Anything but the truth wrapped in positive wording.
My favorite use of words like that, I really became aware of that at Fry's. You know what I'm talking about. When they embrace the word, and my company does it too sometimes, the word opportunity. You know how they always like to say, we have an opportunity. I said, no, you have a pissed off customer is what you've got. You know, you don't have an opportunity. You have a very angry customer out there.
Billy, it's an opportunity to turn it around.
Sure.
Just do the return, Billy.
Hey, I work very, very hard lately. I promise you, I've been working. There's a Bible verse about just I ain't working for them. I'm working for him. So it's kind of one of these deals where I try my hardest to not think I try very hard not to have any of them negative waves from Moriarty. I work very hard. I work very hard to not have them negative waves because that's even wrong. I believe to do that. So I'm working real hard, man, sometimes. But, it's like, it's okay, man. I'm all right. It's all right. Keep it together. Keep it together. Keep it together.
Lady Envy raised her hands and was suddenly flanked by two huge beasts. Both flowed in a blur to greet the mob. Suddenly, blood and bodies spilled onto the flagstones. The Segula pushed past Talk. Senu stepped at Envy's side and shouted, "Awaken our brother!" Lady Envy said, "Agreed. No doubt Tool is about to appear as well, but I suspect they will find themselves too busy to contest each other." Leatherstrap snapped as Mock seemed to fling himself upright, weapons already in his hands. Talk thought, and here I am, all but forgotten. He reached a decision and said, "Have fun, all of you," as he backed up the side street. As the A and the Hound chewed through the screaming mass, Lady Envy spun, eyes wide. She asked, "What? Where are you going?" Talk said, "I've embraced the faith. This mob's heading straight for the Malazan army, though it doesn't know it yet, and I'm going with it." Lady Envy said, "Talk, listen, we shall obliterate this pathetic army and that pale runt leading them. There is no need." Talk said, "Don't wipe them out, please. Envy, carve your way clear, yes, but I need them." Lady Envy said, "But..." Talk said, "No time, I've decided. With Opan's luck, we'll meet again. Go, find your answers, Envy. I've got friends to find." Lady Envy said, "Wait." With a final wave, Talk whirled and ran down the street. A concussive blast of sorcery threw him forward, but he did not turn. Envy was letting loose. He thought, hood knows, she might even have just lost her temper. Gods, leave some of them standing, lass. He swung right at the first intersection he came to and found himself plunging into the midst of screaming peasants, pushing like him towards the city's main artery, where flowed the mass of the faithful. He added his screams, wordless, the sounds that a mute man might make, and clawed with mindless zeal. He thought, like a leaf on a wide, deep river. And thus the chapter ends.
Wow.
What a twist at the end right there.
Yeah. I was really surprised by that, and I love it at the same time. It's kind of brilliant.
Yeah, and I appreciate the callback to Lady Envy telling him to float on the river like the leaf. That was a good way to close out the chapter.
Yeah, absolutely.
For standout moments, Lady Envy constantly poking at the panions. That was pretty enjoyable.
Oh, my word. That is really funny stuff. You ever watch much Blackadder? I've asked you this before, I'm sure.
My German teacher in high school used to put it on, and we'd watch it on breaks. You know, there is some really seriously acerbic wit there exercised, and sometimes I can just see that same kind of nitpicking from a very snipery in a way, and you realize it takes me a minute to realize that somebody's like, wow, that's just got to burn. That's got to sting. Mm-hmm. She really upset them boys. Well, they were out for blood anyhow. It's better just to get them riled up because it might make them make a mistake. Yeah, that's a good point. Gareth, Baeljag, and the Segula tearing the Panions to pieces in the temple. Absolute horror show. Really horror show. You know, even though we had to cut this chapter into 2 episodes, but if you had to watch this
book needs to be done in episodically anyhow, just because something like this would require multiple episodes as it is. That's for an episode alone, just escaping that temple and slaughtering those folks.
You could probably get this chapter done in an episode,
Well,
along
yeah,
with
you
other
probably
stuff,
could.
because it was leading up to the town. So you had the conversation plus the kill hunters, and you got to see the
could get a
Segula
lot
deal
done.
with them, and then you get to the town, right? So
Oh,
I think you
my
could do it in
word.
one episode.
Speaking of the Cal Hunters, I now have another new size reference for them that I find more accurate. Did you watch Romulus?
No.
Okay. There's an abomination there at the end.
Okay.
That approaches about the size I'm thinking about. It's like, okay.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
That's a
we
big
have an
alien.
We have an abomination that's really reminiscent of what's that? This movie was as morbid as what was that one that we liked so much? Resurrection.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's as morbid as that. It's almost more morbid. This guy did the first Evil Dead remake in like 2013. That actually has me kind of like troubled. I don't even really watch it as a repeat. It's gnarly, dude.
Okay.
So yeah, he does some. So it's kind of back to horror roots, and it had some. I think all Hollywood ought to be scared though, because you saw that there's a resurrection of Ian Holmes' face in this movie and voice.
Oh, I haven't watched the movie, so I'm not.
Well, no, I'm just telling you, this is public knowledge.
Okay.
But it's like, wow. And it's done, if you like the Peter Cushing stuff from, what was that one that we liked?
The Uncanny Valley in Rogue One. Yeah, Peter Cushing.
Yeah.
It was not close enough yet.
It was not, but it was there. It was close. We're getting closer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This one's really close, dude. The language, in particular, the words, it's him. Because I don't think it's hard to simulate speech. And I was shocked. I was like, whoa, that is most assuredly in home. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Distracted.
AI.
Yeah, AI, dude.
Mm-hmm. The Segula replacing the poor workers that were hung from the hooks with the Panyan Seer Damen. That was something.
I can't say that they didn't have it coming. I think the Segula word, that's kind of intriguing that they took offense, it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
They took offense.
Didn't take too kindly.
Didn't take too kindly.
Lady Envy having a fit when Talk told her to calm down. That's the best.
Dude, I think the maxim stands no matter what universe you're in or multiverse or whatever. It's like, just never, ever tell a woman to calm down. Any people in particular, but a woman in particular, whoo, it's a bad thing. I found from experience, it's just not, they can say it to you. This can be said to you, yes. But no, you cannot ever say those words.
Yes. Sage advice. I appreciated finding out that Talk is Cartheron Crust's nephew.
Dude, that's a spectacular reveal. Because Cartheron Crust, I mean, what's up with that fella? I mean, it's like...
Yeah, what's up with that fella?
What's up with that fella? So, he's hard as nails. So this explains part of why Talk is hard as nails. It's like, damn gum. Imagine, it was Cartheron Crust's sister's, was his mama. So, in my experience, the sister of tough fellas had to be tough to put up with the tough brothers that they grew up with. So I was like, man, his mama must have been a character, as they say. Mm-hmm. So
probably.
It's a huge reveal, though. I love it.
And then finding out the sordid details of the children of the dead seed.
Yeah, that's bad, dude. That's bad.
Yeah, I don't love that.
Yeah, you know what? It's what I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in our previous discussions of this book, when we were years past, when we were still working together, and I was telling you where I was, this was such a highlight in yours. This always stood out to you big time. I know that because you were always kind of like, if you read the tennis gallery, you probed many times when I was in that book. Had I and just waiting for my disgusted reaction. So.
Finally, Talk's decision to join the Tenniscourie Horde in order to reach the Malazans. Risky,
but quite brilliant. It's like, is that just when the spy training kicked in? To just like, you know what? It's probably safer in a weird way than rolling with this lot. He's going to catch a stray frag from something. When someone drops a building on him at some point, it's like he's going to catch something. It's better to hang out with these, with the rabble. Might be a tad safer staying at the back of the rabble than at the front with these fellas.
Yeah, as long as you're prepared to starve for a while.
Yeah.
All right, great job tonight, Billy.
Hey, man. Great job.
You got any final thoughts before we drop off here?
Just a great episode. Such a great chapter. I was so surprised when Talk took off. Also, after the big reveal about his uncle, but him taking off with the horde it just blew me away. But I understand the maneuver though. But just absolutely brilliant though.
Yeah, agreed. All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you next week.
And we'll see y'all next week.
We thank you all for joining us today.
Again, we really like to thank you for taking the time to be with us, and we've had a really great time talking about the topic today.
If you would like to support our show, you can find us at horsefrogproductions.com, where you can find our Patreon link. Depending on the platform you're listening from, it may also be in the episode description.
And if you'd like to contact us through email, it's at contact@horsefrogproductions.com.